My view of centralized versus decentralized is that in the 21st century, we suddenly have a menu of technology options and business models that are available to us that we've never had before. And I joke, but I'm really not joking about it, that the Romans would recognize our water infrastructure in terms of extracting it, moving it, treating it, using it, discharging it, and so on. Nothing's really changed. Now we have localized, decentralized water technologies that are available that can give us a hybrid technology opportunity to deliver water in a more cost-effective, less impactful, more sustainable, more resilient manner than we've ever had before. Well, if you had a blank sheet of paper right now in 2022, what would a utility look like? What should it look like when we're considering the impacts of climate change, increasing population, aging centralized infrastructure? I mean, would you build infrastructure exactly the same way? I certainly hope not, because that means that we haven't learned anything in terms of what works well and what doesn't work well. So yes, I'm a big advocate, a vocal advocate for not throwing everything out, keeping what works, but also seizing the opportunities in the technology sector that are available right now to move towards localized systems and even extreme decentralization, which is becoming more and more top of mind. I would start from the bottom up. And what I mean by that is start with, what does a water smart home look like? And I use the term home very broadly, but what would you do in the home? How would you integrate it with renewable technologies? And then start to build it block by block and ensure that the city that you've created, piece by piece by piece, is water efficient. It can reuse water. It can potentially have alternative sources of water, whether it's rainwater capture or air moisture capture, as a way to build a city that is much more thoughtful in how we manage water and use that water to be more sustainable and certainly more resilient. So I would start with the bottom up, and you're seeing more and more of that, in particular in the American West. Is how do you build a home in a desert where surface water is so less available than it was just several years ago? Well, clearly one of the challenges we have is that we have an installed base, and installed base is big investments, centralized infrastructure that is not incentivized to really change and move towards that more radical view of, well, what is possible with respect to water utilities in a decentralized, hyper localized world. And the way you get utilities, both power and water utilities, to change is through changes in public policy, and that requires courageous public policy leaders to really challenge the current model and rethink, well, utilities make money by selling water at volume for essentially incredibly low prices, to the point where it's almost free. It's not even noticeable. Well, how do you create a pricing structure that values water? How do you decouple the financial health of a utility from selling more and more water at really discount prices? So that's what has to change, that decoupling, and creating really innovative public policy mechanisms to ensure that the utility thrives in a world where the goal is to use less water and reuse water as much as possible. So, this is not a technology solution, really. It is a public policy and incentive strategy that needs to be implemented to really get us over the hurdle of, well, we're stuck with these big investments that we've had for decades, and they're no longer ideal. The opportunities for emerging markets to do better than we have done in terms of building a water utility and integrated energy utility is incredibly significant, because they essentially do have that blank sheet of paper, and they have a series of choices. Do they build water infrastructure the same way we've been doing it for decades? Or do they look at what's available from a technology perspective and say, this is a better way to build it from scratch, or create that hybrid instead of continuing to invest in centralized systems that are incredibly costly? So I'm a firm believer that leapfrogging is the real opportunity in emerging markets. And, in addition to Africa, I would say that Latin America is in somewhat of a similar position in terms of really rethinking what a water utility looks like from a technology perspective, from a financial business model perspective, and tapping into lessons learned. And we certainly see that in the telecom sector in places like Africa. There's, why would you build landlines? Mobile phones cell is infinitely better and more powerful than building it the way we've had to build it over the past 100 years. So leapfrogging is an incredibly powerful strategy and really taps into very innovative technologies that are available and potentially more cost effective. For me, the most exciting trend opportunity in the water sector very broadly, both utilities and the industrial sector, is the application of exponential technologies. And digital technology is an exponential technology. And what digital can now deliver through technologies such as satellite data, on-the-ground sensors, artificial intelligence applications, is the ability to understand on a real-time basis water quantity and quality and forecast how a system will operate. And what I mean by system is how a watershed might operate, how a utility might operate, how a manufacturing plant will operate in a water-constrained, climate change-impacted world. So that real-time and forecasting capability from a number of different data and information sources is the game changer in the world of water, and absolutely critically needed at this moment in time. However, technology in itself is not going to solve our problems. We really have to be sure that we're understanding how to facilitate digital transformation in both the public and private sector, and that's all about people. So how do you create a strategy and a culture in a utility or a private sector enterprise where digital technologies are embraced and embedded into that enterprise and their operation? And a good friend of mine, former colleague at Deloitte, Jonathan Kopolsky, wrote a book titled The Technology Fallacy. And what he talks about in the Technology Fallacy book is not adopting digital, but being digital. And if an enterprise becomes digital, it means that it's aligned with their strategy. The workforce has the right culture, the right tools to ensure that digital technologies are delivering the value that is needed.
K2.